So, Jupiter in astrology, that's what we're going to talk about today. And at the end of this video, you will understand better than any astrologer could ever tell you the impact of Jupiter in your own birth chart, based on your own inner wisdom, intuition, and experience of the world. So that's my promise to you when you listen to this video about Jupiter. Jupiter is a very beautiful star in the sky. The planets have been historically called the wandering stars because they look like stars. It's just that, opposed to the fixed stars, they change their position. If you think about the constellations, they are always the same and the stars move together in the sky. But the planet changed their position. So sometimes they are in one zone of the sky and sometimes in another. And this is how astrologers can see, well, they track the movements of the planets and see how they impact a certain person or humanity as a whole. So, from an astrological point of view, or from a human point of view, everything is geocentric. We humans are at the center of everything, and then the planets and the stars are moving around us in a big circle. So that's why when you plot a birth chart, you make a circle, and then you plot where the planets were exactly when you were born. So perhaps one or several planets were at the south, another more like westward direction, and so on. And then astrologers see, okay, is there some sort of relation between them? If they are on opposite side, for example, they are said to have opposing energies, like they can be conflicting. Whereas if it's, for example, 30 or 60 degrees, 60 is called a sextile, so 120 a trine, that is a more beneficial energy. So this is how astrology has always worked. We humans are at the center, and then we see something is happening in the sky, and then we see, does that impact a person or humanity, and see the relationship between what's happening above and what is happening here at Earth. But Jupiter is a very beautiful star in the sky that is quite easy to see, even though we have so much light pollution now from artificial light that we can hardly see the sky that our forefathers did some 100 years ago. There's hardly any place on Earth where we can really see what the sky once looked like in its magnificence. But the planet, the sun and the moon and the planets are still fairly easy to see if you know where they are. You have to locate them first. And I'm using a Norwegian site when I try to locate planets and so on where I live. I have quite a good view. So once I know where they are, I can see them, even if they can be difficult to see because of, as I said, all the artificial lights. So if someone has a good app or other way to locate the planets, please put it in the comments so we can help each other out finding the planets. Because when Jupiter is high in the sky during the night, it is easy to see. But sometimes Jupiter is high in the sky during daytime, and of course, then it will be impossible to see. So why I'm talking about watching the sky and locating Jupiter is because astrology has become some sort of almost intellectual exercise where everybody is like using these online calculators, checking their own birth chart, and you look into a computer screen. Or before that, you use these what's called ephemerides. It's tables with where showing, plotting the positions of the planets. So you can do that back in time and forwards in time. And this is from 2001 to 2050, the American ephemeris, which is the most usual thing. And this is much older. I got these from my mentor, as I call him, from 1900 to 2000. So I prefer to look at these. I mean, then you have online interactive tools that you can see exactly how the planets move. But sometimes when you look at the screen, you lose the connection to the world and the beauty and the sky. So I think that is problematic. And this is why I mentioned this, is because, as I said in the beginning, we are going to use our own wisdom, inner wisdom and intuition and experience of the world to understand Jupiter better in astrology, better than anyone else. So that is why I want you to start looking at the sky and experiencing Jupiter, which is perhaps the most easy planet to see. If we compare to Venus, is also easy to find in the sky, the morning star or evening star. It is always like 48 degrees from the sun. So the sun and Venus, they are always like moving together. So they are occupying the same part of the sky. And it's the same with Mercury, that can also only be seen at dusk or dawn, because it's like at the most 28 degrees from the sun. So the planets here were now in Sweden in the summer, they are almost impossible to see because the day the day is so long. The sunset is about 10 p.m. and then the sun rises again about 4 a.m. So we have very few hours of darkness, and it's not really dark. So it's like some twilight in the hours between the the days. So the planets are very difficult for me to watch right now. So it feels, even if I love the summer, it feels a little bit like a loss not being able to see planets regularly. A day when the sky is clear, of course. Unfortunately, there is a lot of, spraying of the skies, which disturbs everything. But sometimes the sky is clear enough so that we can watch the planets, especially when it's dark and in wintertime, of course. So Jupiter is historically been seen as a benefic, a beneficial planet alongside with Venus. The Mars and Saturn has been seen as malefics, planets that have a bad sort of influence. And that is perhaps a little bit because Mars, when you locate it, you might even with the naked eye see that it has a slightly reddish shine. It can be difficult to see, but it is possible. And it's also possible, even though we have this light pollution sky, to locate Saturn and see its slightly yellowish brown kind of light as well. So that is maybe why they were called like malefics, and beautiful Jupiter and Venus have been called the benefics. And Jupiter has been connected with good luck and good fortune and abundance, and that is because Jupiter has an expansive energy. So it's the energy of expansion. If you compare planets to zodiac signs, for example, zodiac signs they have been given the names from constellations in the sky, but they are not the constellations, but rather zones of the sky. So you divide this sky into 12 different zones, and these different zones have different kinds of energy, and depending on if, like, the sun or whatever planet occupies a certain zone or zodiac sign, the planetary energy will be modified by that zone or zodiac sign. And the zodiac signs are rather a complex set of energies, but the planetary energies, like Jupiter, for example, are more singular. So Jupiter is the energy of expansion. So here we have this good luck thing, because you can think of expansion as an expansion of wealth, of money, of fortune, but also expansion of your own mind. So that's been connected with learning and long distance travel, because when you travel far, you will learn. And especially historically, people traveled far to these universities, for example, in Cologne or Bologna. So long distance travel, learning, philosophy, religion has also been connected with Jupiter. And this visionary long philosophy, long distance travel, explore the world have rather many similarities with the zodiac sign of Sagittarius. So since Hellenistic Greece, Jupiter has been seen as the ruling planet of Sagittarius. And it has also been seen as the ruling planet of Pisces, because Pisces is not as visionary or explore the world kind of sign, but it's more exploratory in the mind, in fantasy and dreams and intuition. So nowadays, astrologers normally say that it's Neptune that is a ruling planet of Pisces, but Neptune is a very fantasy, illusions, dreams kind of planet that is, I think, too beyond this world or reality to really match Pisces, because if you know people who are born Pisces or have a lot of Pisces element in their birth chart, like have their ascendant in Pisces, they are not like, all of them are not like mystics or gurus. So I don't think Neptune is such a good match for some people born in Pisces, perhaps, but not all. So I think Jupiter also has this expansive kind of energy that you can expand your mind and have these dreams, fantasies, and ideas and associative thinking that Pisces have without becoming some mystic guru kind of person. So, what is Jupiter's impact on your birth chart? The thing is, in astrology, you can add like hundreds of details in your birth chart, except for the planets, or you can see all the angles that the planets make between each other, if they are 60 or 45 or 90 degrees between them. And you can add comets and asteroids and houses and Arabic parts, and you can popular now, for example, are the nodes of the moon. Suddenly they have, if I read older books that are like 30 years old or so, they need no, the nodes of the moon, you can hardly read anything about it. And now the nodes of the moon have become so important because suddenly they tell you about karma and previous lives. I'm a bit skeptic about that, and that is because my mentor has been very versed in Theosophy, Hare Krishna, Buddhism, Taoism, and Hinduism. And then to think that karma can be found in one little point, I don't agree with that, but we will take that in another video that will probably be rather interesting, talking about karma and previous lives. So with hundreds of details in a birth chart, which one are most important? Well, normally in astrology, you say that it is the sun's position in your birth chart, the moon, and the ascendant. But how much more important compared to all the other, like if you have 100 details, and these are 3, how much more important are they than the other 97, for example? Are they like, do they make up 20, 50, 30% of the explanatory sort of factor in your birth chart? Or you never read that or hear that in astrology. It's just that, okay, these are most important. But if I take, for example, this is a really good book. Here it's like, now this is in Sweden. This is symbols of the horoscope, it says in Sweden. I don't know what the American original title is. But then I have to see it. Well, can't find it right now. So, but the thing is, Robert Hahn is a really good astrologer, and this is a classic. It's just that the sun and the moon and the ascendant, they are the most important sort of symbols in your birth chart, but they are not given more space than anything else, than the other planets and aspects and things. So, and it's the same with, if you take another great book by Robert Hahn, this is also a classic, it's Planets in Transits, where he explains, you know, when you have your birth chart and you plot all the position of the planets, and they don't stop moving, so they continue move, and they will then the planets will come in certain relationships compared with your birth chart. For example, we have Saturn. Say that it's Saturn in your birth chart it's in Taurus. And then after 29 years, you have a Saturn return. Saturn will have made its revolution in the zodiac. So will slowly have changed its position compared to, well, the zones of the sky and the constellations. So after 29 years, it will be in the same position again as in your birth chart. And that is called a Saturn return. And since Saturn is considered a little bit like this malefic or a planet of structure and control, that will be some sort of, or is seen as a sort of problematic period in your life where a lot of changes will happen. But it's also, of course, change when you start to become grown up and build your own family, and you have some work experiences, and maybe you didn't like it. So we can understand there may be other factors influencing not only Saturn returning to the positioning of your birth chart that make this period when you are about 29 years old a little bit problematic. So anyhow, we cannot really trust any astrological books to understand or knowledge that I'm aware of that gives us some sort of ranking, some sort of how we can rank all the symbols and factors in the birth chart. So what are we going to do then to understand the impact of Jupiter in your birth chart? Well, we are going to see the world from an electromagnetic perspective. I have 4 videos in a little series about electromagnetic astrology that you can listen to if you want to know more. But in essence, you can say that, I mean, we live in an electromagnetic world. I'm talking about electromagnetism here to explain the world. You could say, oh, everything is like energy, it's quantum. But when you talk about this very difficult to explain aspects like quantum, it feels like as soon as you have something paranormal that you cannot really explain, you just, oh, it's quantum, so you just dump it into the quantum field sort of bucket. But I think we need to use some sort of way of looking at the world that is less illusory or difficult to understand. So I think looking at the world from an electromagnetic perspective gives us the tool to understand our reality in a way that science never tell us. I mean, if we look at the official science or the official narrative about our world, I would say that it is mostly nonsense. Sorry. It's just that I showed you these tables of the planetary movements that you can follow thousands and thousands of years back in time and forwards in time, so we know where the planets will be and their position 5,000 years from now. So our whole world is like a clockwork that functions with minute perfection and predictability. not at all what science tells us about, I would say, their explanation about reality. But we're not going to go into that now. It's just that when we now, how we experience the world is through our normally five senses: touch, smell, vision, hearing, and so on. But those are very limited, of course, because we are always at every moment totally submerged in an enormous electromagnetic field that we don't really perceive with our senses, because our vision, hearing, and so on, they only make up or can only see like less than 1% of all these electromagnetic frequencies that we are constantly submerged into. So our brain and our senses, they filter out almost all of reality, of every, you can think about these electromagnetic frequencies as information that are constantly coming into you, but we consciously only understand or perceive less than 1% of them. And this, yeah, so it's not much, so we don't have a clue about what kind of reality we're really living in. And what makes up this electromagnetic field? I would say that the most important factor is magnetism from the Earth, Mother Earth's own magnetism. And the Earth also has its own heartbeat, you could say. You have heard about it, I suppose. The Schumann resonance is like a pulse. I think it's some sort of electromagnetic pulse from the surface of the Earth and the upper atmosphere. And it averages about 7.8 hertz, but it's a band of frequencies between 3 and 60, if I remember correctly, which is approximately the same kind of band of frequencies as our brain waves. You know, the brain operates in certain frequencies, and it's not like, oh, what a coincidence, they are the same as the Schumann resonance. I believe we simply synchronize with the Earth. We sort of get in tune with all these different frequencies. We are normally in the beta wave when we are awake and we talk to friends and at work, and then we operate, our brains operate with these beta waves. But when we are more relaxed, which we should be more often, of course, we are in the alpha wave state. And then when we're sleeping, delta waves and so on, and we meditate. So there are different kind of brain waves that synchronize or are part of this world, of Mother Earth. So, and the electromagnetic field of the Earth is also important for life. Or when birds fly, they navigate via this electromagnetic kind of field. I read a book, I don't have it, so I can't show it now, but it's called Body Electric. And it says that, I mean, it was written in the 80s, but when the author, I don't remember his name now, when he explained about magnetic fields, it's like normally when you draw electric fields or make these lines, for example, we humans, we have electrons flowing out in our bodies, so we also create an electromagnetic field around us that looks like a toroidal field. Everything is like toroidal field, but if you look at an image of a toroidal field, you will see that it looks like I have like an apple around me, so it looks like this. So, and you draw lines, but actually we have no way of actually describing or knowing what this magnetic field really is. Even if we draw these lines so we can see the expansion of the field or its field of influence, it's really, where does it really stop? Actually, even if we cannot measure it, it continues like forever. So, but still, the electromagnetic, or these fields of magnetism from the Earth help birds, insects, everything navigate. They have in this book, Body Electric, he writes about this experiment where they put blinders on birds, and the birds can still navigate correctly. It's just that when they put a little magnet on the bird as well, then they become confused. So you can see this earth, I mean, the earth, it's Mother Earth, and it's so important with all these waves and heartbeats. And so this electromagnetic field that we are submerged into is, of course, made primarily by the Earth. But also another extremely important factor is, of course, the radiation from the sun. And the sun is like, I mean, it's a life-giving sun. Without the sun, there would be no life on Earth at all. So I think if we can see the divinity or God or whatever you want as this divine spark within us, within every little cell in us, we can see the sun really as the Son of God, something that is in addition to the spark within us. This is what creates life on Earth. So the sun and the radiation, of course, electromagnetic radiation and the plasma energy from the sun is, of course, extremely important for life and everything. And then we have the third super important factor, which makes up this electromagnetic field that we are submerged into, and that is, of course, the moon, radiation from the moon. And we know the moon is important also for all kinds of cycles on Earth. How like turtles move and women's period. And also there is this farmer's almanac. I saw not long ago a little video about when you follow the farmer's almanac follows the moon, because if you synchronize your farmer activity with the moon, you will have greater harvests and less problems with weeds. And it was something about sowing like thallus, things that grow above the soil and upwards during waxing moon, and root vegetables during waning moon. But there are more things to it, but there are even courses helping you improve your own garden and your hobby or whatever by following the cycles of the moon. So in this perspective, when we are born, we are not like, okay, before we are born, as I speak about in these other video series about electromagnetic astrology, we are surrounded or enveloped by our mother's womb. But once we come out in the world, we are not coming out in emptiness, but we are coming out into this electromagnetic field. So we get a total blast of that. And that field is, of course, at that point and that time, very specific, because the planets and the moons and everything will be in a certain position. So this will be your basic imprint that you will carry for the rest of your life. So, and as I said, we have the electromagnetic field from the Earth, and we have the sun and the moon. And the sun and the moon, we know because we have tables on it, so we know where they are. We can just watch it in the sky where they are. The electromagnetic field, as such, the Earth, what kind of symbol is that in astrology? Well, I would say that is the ascendant. But not only the ascendant is one of the most important symbols in astrology, which we are all agree on. That is rising part of the sky that is rising in the east. And why a point in the sky that is rising in the east is important is never explained really in these astrological books. But I explained that in this other video series. But in essence, you can see if you put us humans in the center, which astrology does, everything is like geocentric from our perspective, then everything moves like one revolution every 24 hours in like a clockwise direction. And so we will get a sort of blast from primarily the east, because that is the moment of the electromagnetic field. The electromagnetic field is not static. It's always influenced by all these movements. So this is why the ascendant is so important. But the electromagnetic field is also explained by the descending part of the sky in the west, as well as the middle of the sky, the part of the sky that is due south, which is called medium Caeli in astrology, as well as the imum Caeli, the bottom of the sky, which is the part of the sky that is due north, or actually behind your back. But in the birth chart, it's like called the north, is the bottom there. So these points describe the electromagnetic field, and when you look at these points from an electromagnetic perspective, you must place them symmetrically. The ascendant and the descendant are always like east and west, but when you use these online calculators or manual methods, the imum Caeli and the middle of the sky and bottom of the sky, they are sometimes tilting like their axis in different directions, which when you see it from an electromagnetic perspective is not correct. And I talk about that in the other videos. But in essence, we have the sun and the moon and these points of the sky that are telling us about the electromagnetic field from the Earth. And in relation to these points, how important is, for example, Jupiter? Well, you remember in the beginning of this video, I was asking you to locate Jupiter and see it. And I would say that most people have never been aware of Jupiter or really seen Jupiter or really understood that if they saw a bright star, you cannot understand if it's like Sirius or Betelgeuse or Jupiter, because it's just one of many stars. And then you think, how often have you seen the sun or the moon, for example, or the Earth? So now comes your intuition, inner wisdom, your experience of the world. How often have you seen the planets? And how often have you seen and experienced and watched the sun and the moon or the Earth? This puts something in perspective, doesn't it? We know the importance of the sun and the moon and the Earth for our life, for biological life, for cycles in nature, for the rhythms and the insects and birds navigating across the world. But it's not like, oh, Mercury determines how turtles move, or Jupiter, we have a Jupiter almanac because that's how we grow tomatoes. No. So, and most people have never seen the planets. So this is really a bit for you to decide how important the planets are, but is it their importance 100th of that of the sun and the moon and the electromagnetic field coordinates, the ascendant, descendant, medium Caeli, imum Caeli, or is it 1,000 or 10,000? I would say it's not unimportant, but the planets and their movements will give you a slight electromagnetic nudge, and they will give you a slight kind of influence in your birth chart. But focusing on all the planets, if you look at it from an electromagnetic perspective, we understand that what we should look at and delve into, and if we should sort of use our time, our short lifespan wisely, we should dedicate that when we study astrology to the sun, the moon, and all these 4 coordinates, because they are immensely more important than the planets, especially for the individual. So you can think about the planet as small electromagnetic nudges. Or if you think about a symphony, this huge orchestra where you have violins and cello and so on. And you can think about the planet as this little symbol that you go a little sometimes. But looking at, if you're listening to the and it says like, okay, now I'm going to understand the major themes in this symphony. I will try to find the melody. Do you listen to the cello? So you remove everything else and you listen to this. I would say you won't understand anything about that symphony or the melody or the major themes. So you listen to other things. So this is what I think how we should view the planets, which is not a popular view because astrology has been developed over the thousands of years, and there have been additions, more and more complicated additions and symbols and things that we should look at. So it becomes very cluttered. And it's hard for an ordinary person to understand their own birth chart, because if you plug in your birth data into these online calculators, you get this long list of explanatory texts, and it becomes a whole mess. And yet again, it's like the sun and the moon and the ascendant, they don't get that much more room than all the other planets and aspects. So I think it's important to use, as I said, your inner wisdom, intuition, and experience of the world to understand the impact that the planets really have. However, I would say if you look at humanity as a whole, I mean, we, as I said before, we have these electromagnetic fields around us or auras, and we are part of this huge electromagnetic field. So we have something, human collective consciousness, that we unknowingly or not consciously communicate or are connected together. And if we have planets are in a certain position in the sky, they may, of course, give a little nudge to many, many people, to millions of people. That could potentially start a snowball effect. So we will have changes in human history, new eras, because of this snowball effect that may or may not happen. There have been instances in the past where astrologers have said, oh, well, now we have all these planets lining up in water signs, like in Cancer, so there will be floods, and there haven't been any when there have been any floods. So just because the planets are in certain positions influencing us in a certain way, we may not be receptive to it because they are not the only energetical influences that we are exposed to. I mean, when you meet a person or several people, when you go to a concert, and there's so many forces influencing us, and the planets are part of this everything. Their energies are always there with us, but they are just one of many, many, many electromagnetic influences that we are exposed to. However, sometimes we actually, as I said, can see this snowball effect. But is that because of the planets, or are the planetary alignments used to get a certain effect? For example, we know in 2020, the planets lined up in Capricorn. And Capricorn is a sign, a zodiac sign of long-term planning, control, and structure. And of course, if all the planets line up there, then if you will want to do something that has to do with control, power, and long-term sort of visions that you want to launch, then of course that was a very beneficial point in time to do that. And we can be quite sure that the powers that be, you can call them deep state, Illuminati, lizard overlords, whatever, they certainly, I mean, they tell us that astrology and all these paranormal things or spirituality, that is just nonsense, and then they use it for their own benefit. So the reason why we had this 2020, you could say that, oh, it was because all these planets lined up in Capricorn, or you can understand that maybe it was planned to launch this thing in 2020 at that moment, because even if it's just sort of slight nudge of energy, it will give you some sort of momentum to launch something of the kind that happened in 2020. I mean, it's the same thing that maybe you're planning a wedding, and maybe you could look at the planets and say, okay, maybe I should, just to make sure that I do that at the beneficial time point, when I look at my own and my partner's birth chart, or that will give you a lot of headache, and maybe this will perhaps not be so beneficial because you will have too many thoughts about it. So it will be stressful and have a negative effect anyway, because, as I said, the planets can give you a slight nudge, but it's not everything. So we have another way also of seeing the impact of Jupiter and what that really means in your birth chart. That will become some sort of proof of what I have already talked about. And as I've already mentioned, the planetary energies are more singular compared with the zodiac signs. And Jupiter has the is the energy of expansion, as we have seen, the expansion of good wealth and fortune and abundance of learning. But there is also a negative side of that energy, of course, and that is excessive risk-taking and excessive behavior in general. But if you think about that as a force in nature, because everything is forces in nature, you have the sun and the moon, which we have already talked about, and their impact on our biological life. So add to this matrix the energy of expansion. And think about what that would mean if it was strong or was more than a slight nudge. Expansion of volcanic eruption, expansion of storms, expansion of floods, expansion of these swarms of insects that the Bible talks about, for example. Would that work if Jupiter had this strong influence on your birth chart? It would mean that it also had a strong influence on the electromagnetic field, and then our world with this expansive energy would be very disruptive, because an energy can be both positive and negative. So you can think, oh, it's an expansion in harvest, but also an expansion of misery of all kinds, of disease and, as I said, flood and wildfires. So from that, because the planets are, compared to the sun and the moon, are much more singular in their energy, they cannot simply be very strong in this electromagnetic field, because it would wreak havoc in our world. Even a planet that is very beneficial, if you think about Venus, that is this harmony and love, that sounds really good. And it's actually the energy that brings differences together in a harmonic whole. And that sounds very lovely, of course, because then it could bring humanity together. But bringing different individuals or individual factors into something that becomes a whole, it would be like us being in some sort of trance state throughout our lives. And that sounds lovely, of course, for an hour or two. But if we would all sit in this trance, not knowing exactly who am I, who are you, what the difference is with me and the trees and the birds, we would not have an individual human experience. So even something that sounds so lovely as Venus can become almost very destructive if it's too much of that. So the planetary energies, they are singular energies, and they are always there for us. It's not just because the planets are in a certain position. They are always part of this electromagnetic field. Is that just that from this, when we look at how the world works, we can understand that they do not have a major impact on biology of the world or on our birth chart. And this is also what you experience yourself if you look at the sky and try to locate these planets. It can be quite difficult. And that is the beauty of it, that they provide these nuances to our world. So that was Jupiter in astrology. A lot of talk about, that was not only about Jupiter, but about a lot of other factors. But I hope by now that I have fulfilled my promise, that you will now have a rather good understanding of the impact of Jupiter in your birth chart by use of your intuition, inner wisdom, and experience of the world. Thank you.